The Dream SMP. Arguably one of the most popular things in the sphere of live entertainment right now. With almost 40 members whitelisted, this survival multiplayer server, or SMP for short, serves as a hub for its creators to work with one another in a new kind of storytelling. For years, the Dream SMP has been beloved by fans for its enthralling storytelling, interesting characters, and sense of community with one another. But recently, people have begun to wonder how long this can last. With the recent news of a few of the first members ending their stories on the server, people have begun to speculate on how a proper finale for the server would go. Would everyone show up one last time? Would a war finally destroy the world and everyone in it? Would the end become unlocked, allowing for someone to finally beat the game once and for all? Or would the server simply fade away as more and more members moved on, leaving the story unfinished and the SMP abandoned? Of course, with the knowledge of how something could end, comes with the guesses for ways in which it won't. People began joking around with their ideas of ways in which the SMP would come to a close. I personally went on Reddit and posed a question asking for people to give their incorrect guesses on how the Dream SMP would end. Some said it would be a satisfying conclusion for every character and story arc, because we all know that's going to happen, right guys? Right? Others said one random person would take over the entire server by any means necessary. But what if both were true? What if the end involved a doomsday scenario for the members while still giving finality to the end of the server as a whole? What if the end was so ridiculous that it just might work? This is my totally true, absolutely 100% confirmed will happen theory on how the Dream SMP will end. Hold on to your hats, folks, because it's going to be one crazy ride. Before we get into the video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this. I am trying to reach 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so it would really mean a lot. Okay, now back to the video. The main characters. This theory centers around two very important people, Character Slime and the Panda. Now, some of you may be asking, what panda? Who's the panda? Do you mean pandas like Sapnap? No, this panda is the one that both creators, and I'm sure many of you watching, forgot about. This panda is the one in which Sapnap and Puns rescued and then subsequently hid in the ground on the day of Dream's prison break. Now, if you've joined the Dream SMP fanbase recently, then you may or may not be aware of the history in regards to animals taken as pets on the server. There have infamously been pet wars where no players really suffered, but the same cannot be said for the pets. These animals were the main casualties in a war between people who could have resolved their issues without the ruthless murder of numerous animals. And this is exactly what would have happened to this panda if he ever got out from his hiding place. But of course, this panda doesn't know that. He's been stuck in a hole. All this panda knows is that two people took him from his home, put him in a hole, and left him to rot, essentially to starve to death. Because of this, the panda starts to get mad. Real mad. He begins to have a vengeance that grows so great, he vows to kill any person on the surface in revenge. And just as he is about to try and dig his way out before he starves to death, he hears a noise. He turns around and sees Charlie Slimesicle. Slime is one of, if not the oldest member of the server. From other lore streams, we've learned that he was originally a slime mob who, over millions of years, morphed into a somewhat human-like being. We know he's been watching the server for a very long time and has most likely been given knowledge of every major event and why it happened. In the finale of Las Nevadas, we see the death of Slime at the hands of Purpled, but when we see him next, he's partially reverted back to a more slime-like state. We can assume he retains at least a few of his memories from before, as shown by his ability to write out Legacy for Quackity, but from then on, he disappears. Most likely he will once again have to morph back into a more functioning version of himself over a long period of time, just as before. Especially since, based on the logic of a slime, when one dies, it splits into smaller versions of itself. Therefore, slime is technically half the man he used to be, and just needs time to become himself again. Or does he? The beginning of the theory. According to our timeline, the long-forgotten panda is about to dig himself free when he meets the now more slime-like Slimecicle. Slime has been seen to be able to overtake the functions of someone when ingested by them, and, knowing this, places himself in front of a starving panda in order to be eaten. The panda, seeing a source of food for the first time in, well, let's just say a very long time, eats the slime in front of him. But as we've seen with Fundy, just because someone eats Charlie Slimecicle doesn't mean he's dead. Instead, he just exists within this new body. Therefore, the panda, now having Charlie Slimecicle living within him, has someone to communicate with. And it just so happens that Slime is very knowledgeable on the server around them. So together, they dig their way up into a now very changed SMP. In this version of a finale, a long time has passed since the panda was buried in the ground. The server has once again fallen into chaos over and over, alliances formed, broken, and altogether forgotten. The original buildings have been broken down, rebuilt, and pieced back together, but sometimes even forgotten. As Charlie and the panda look around, it seems that humanity has once again been unable to solve their own problems, history repeating itself once more. And Charlie, the once peaceful man, becomes overwhelmed with grief, anger, and hatred. This same server that put his best friend Quackity through hell, causing him to die in the process, would never change. Not unless he did something about it. And the panda, having begun to absorb Charlie into him, has now started to understand the true extent of what he's witnessing. In that moment, the two make a pact to make sure this never happens again by any means necessary. The plan. The two begin to form a plan to bring an end to constant war by creating one of their own. The war to end all wars. The final war. They decide that in order for the server to be free of the chaos of man, that man will have to die. Every last one of them. But first, there had to be a reason to bring everyone together in the first place. A reason even the most untrustworthy of members would venture out of hiding to see things for themselves. The perfect bait. And Charlie knew just who would do that. Alyssa. As one of the original members of the server, Alyssa was a fan favorite among players and viewers alike. As a close friend of the Dream Team, she was quickly added in the beginnings of the server and even took part in some of the first bits of lore as a story element began to be added in. But as time went on, she became less and less present on the SMP before finally confirming she no longer had the IP address for the server. Canonically, however, it's as though she seemingly disappeared into thin air on the server, leaving one day and never coming back. However, if there was one character who would know the current whereabouts of character Alyssa, it would be Slime. So our main characters venture off to find Alyssa and try to convince her to come back. And since Slime has such an extensive knowledge of the server, they manage to do just that. The execution. Upon the unexpected return of Alyssa, members begin to emerge from their homes to see if the news is true. Only the original members even remember her, and the rest have just heard stories of her existence. And now, after all this time, she's back. And just as people have begun to celebrate and reminisce with her from the shadows, a new player emerges. The panda, having now fully merged with Charlie Slimecicle and having both the knowledge of his own torture and every other conflict on the SMP, is now ready to make his last stand. The people, including Alyssa, sensing the ultimate threat, now stand together for one last time, to fight for their server. It begins. Withers spawn in a ring around the group, redstone machines fire a slew of arrows with potions of harming, and the once dormant TNT grid of L'Manberg is once again reactivated. The panda roars and charges forward. The battle rages. One by one, players realize that there is no hope, each taking a moment to repair the broken relationships of their past one last time before being slain by the beast they created. Players fall side by side, once friends, then enemies, and now, in their last moments, reunited once more, until only two people remain: Quackity and Sapnap. Having grouped up in the beginnings of the battle, the two froze as the panda began to speak, yelling about the injustices and the betrayals that they had caused. They were given one last chance to make amends, one final minute before the anger took hold, and nothing would stop this panda from ending it all. He holds a button in his hand. It was the missing nuke. The two, for a brief moment, have a look of recognition in their eyes. It was the panda, and it was slime. But they knew there was no hope, so instead, they closed their eyes and waited for the end. The panda began to charge, and together, the panda and Charlie Slimesicle muttered, "Goodbye, Dream SMP." They pushed the button, and the world came to an end. Conclusion. And that is my totally real 100% will happen Dream SMP ending. It will be very interesting to see how long the server goes until this happens, but we can always wait and see. Until then, that's just a theory. A Dream SMP theory! And... Sorry, MatPet, I really didn't know how else to end this, but I really enjoy your videos and I wanted to try it out for myself. Okay, bye!